Getting your iPad home screen set up right can massively boost your organization and productivity. This simple, clean iPad home screen setup is going to do just that. Intrigued? Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel where our mission is to give you tech tips, tricks and reviews that help you out in everyday situations. Do consider subscribing to the channel. You'll see a lot more of that. So, nice. I'm going to walk you through my iPad home screen setup, which I've been using for a while now. It's not just work related, it's not just home related, it's kind of a hybrid home screen setup that lets me manage everything and means I don't have to always switch between different home screens. If we could divert your eyes downwards to the iPad, you are now looking at the home screen here, which is quite nice, clean design where we've got a few different widgets going on, as well as some app folders which contain some of my most commonly used apps. Let's take a walk through, shall we? Over here in the top left, we've got Apple's calendar app, which is my calendar app of choice. It is telling me that now is YouTube time, so well, good job I'm sticking to that then. I really like Apple's calendar app. I think they've added a lot of features to it over the years that make it really handy. I love that you can link the address of events to Apple CarPlay. I like their shared calendar system, which lets my wife and I share our different calendars to make sure I never double book anything, which I basically used to do once a week before I started using this. I like to look at the monthly view on here more often than not, so I can see a good overview of what's coming up. But then you can also obviously drill down into the week and the day as well, as you can with any other calendar. I just like the layout of Apple's calendar system. I've got really used to it now. I really like their travel time system. When you set up a new calendar entry and add a location, it's going to give you a travel time. You can base that travel time on your starting location. It's going to give you accurate timings in terms of driving or public transport to get there. And if you add that, you can see we've got a travel time there of 5 hours, 5 minutes on this calendar entry. And when I set that up, it's going to factor in the travel time into the calendar as well. So you'll see the event itself as well as the travel time preceding it. So it's going to block out that time for you in the calendar so you know how long it's going to take. The Apple Calendar app's fairly straightforward. You probably can get more functionality out of something like Google Calendar. Where I'm an Apple device user, it just makes sense for me. The next widget along here is for probably my most commonly used app. This is the Things app, and it's a to-do list app. You can see this brings me straight into the area for my YouTube channel, but if I switch over to my today list, you can see all my different to-dos that I've got on today specifically. Quite a lazy day for me, filming a few YouTube videos as well as a couple of simple home tasks. So that's the today view, and then you can look at any of your upcoming tasks as well. So I've got a whole load of work stuff to do on Monday there. The really great thing here is that you can sync Apple's calendar to it, so you can see all your calendar entries alongside your to-dos all in one place, which I really love. And then from the widget, you can add a quick new to-do to your list of choice, or just view what to-dos you've got outstanding. You can mail straight to it, so it's got its own unique email address. So if an email comes in and it's something you know you need to work on later, you can just forward that straight to Things and it will land in your inbox where you can organize it as you need to. It will sync across all your different devices, so iPad, iPhone and Mac, although you do have to pay separately for each of those versions of the app. But I think it's definitely worth having it across all three. I particularly like the iPad and the Mac versions of the app because they have a whole load of keyboard shortcuts. You can do things like just pressing the spacebar to quickly add a new to-do, or from within any app you like. If you press Option spacebar on the Mac, you can add a to-do from anywhere. So you could be on a website and you can add a to-do automatically with a link to that website in it straight from there without having to leave the website and stop what you're doing. So it's really powerful, really nice app that just fits straight into your workflow, and I love it. The next widget along the top, we've got another one of Apple's standard apps, which is the Apple Mail app. I don't need to tell you too much about this. It's fairly limited compared to things like Outlook, but it's still my preferred way of managing my email on my Apple devices just because of the tight integration between all of Apple's different apps. And it means I can just have a quick glance at my most recent 4 emails from there and click straight into them and read the contents. So I can quickly see without having to jump into the app whether anything important comes in. On the next row down, I've got a smart stack, and this is the only smart stack I have on this home screen. You can see that I've got it set to smart rotate, which means it's going to give me a context specific widget depending on the time of the day and what it thinks I want to look at. At the moment it's showing me the weather, but also in this smart stack I have an Apple Notes widget as well as a music widget which is showing Christmas, which must be the last time I played any music from this iPad, although we're in April. I also have the battery widget in here, which is just showing my iPad battery and Apple Pencil. And then finally we have the clock widget, which is showing me the time in a few different places. I wouldn't want to hide something like my email or my calendar away in a smart stack, because then if it's not automatically showing to me, I've got to flick through, and they're things I want to see all the time. Down here on the bottom left, and this is the second last widget on here, this is actually a files widget. So I've got various different files in here. If I click on this one, this brings up MindNode, which is a mind mapping app. This is the files widget, but MindNode does have its own widget, which is really useful as well, letting you access your most recent mind maps. MindNode is a really useful app. If you haven't heard of it, you should check it out. It makes it really, really easy to create mind maps, and it's really useful for sketching out ideas. And then also within my files widget at the moment, it's just showing me my 4 most recently accessed files. So I've got a couple of recent YouTube shorts in there, for example, as well. So useful to just have those handy. I access the files app on my iPad all the time. My entire YouTube workflow, in fact, is managed from my iPad. I do all the editing on here. I don't touch a computer or a Mac to do that. It's all from within here. So useful to have quick access to my files. And then we'll skip over the app folders for a minute and just come to the last widget down here in the bottom right. I did have a notes widget in here, but this is actually a quick notes specific widget. So this notes widget over here in the Smart Stack will let me access my most recent notes, but this widget specifically lets me access recent quick notes. Quick notes are an incredibly useful feature on the iPad. If you don't know about them, if you've got an Apple Pencil, you can, from wherever you are on the iPad, just drag up from the bottom right corner, which is going to create you a new quick note, and just quickly take a note from there. If you've got a keyboard attached, you can type it, or you can write with the Apple Pencil very messily, and then just save that quick note. If you don't have an Apple Pencil, you can actually set up a new quick note from within the control center. It's this little icon here. It's not there by default, but you can add it into the control center, and then it's going to do you the same thing. It will always bring up your most recent quick note, but you just tap new to start a new one. If you're within a website, for example, and you add a quick note, you're going to have the option to add a link to that website automatically within the note, which again just speeds things up and makes things nice and easy, and means you're not interrupting your workflow every time you want to note something down. We've covered all the widgets, and now we're going to come to the individual app folders here and talk through some of the apps that I like to have access to quickly on my home screen. I am guilty of watching a lot of TV and films, so the first folder we've got here is the media folder. This folder contains pretty much every streaming app known to man, as well as my VPNs, so I can watch those streaming apps when I'm abroad, and also the Sonos app, which lets me control my multi-room audio when I'm at home. Coming on to the next folder, where I tend to keep airline apps as well as apps for booking hotels, so I've got booking.com and Airbnb in there, as well as various airline apps that are regular ones that I use, so I can access my boarding passes and tickets and things quickly. The next folder along here is for shopping apps. Nothing too exciting in here, mainly contains apps for the different retailers, as well as some payment apps and apps for different couriers. Next up, we've got Office, which contains some of the apps I might use for work. We've got Apple's own Numbers, Pages and Keynotes apps in there, as well as the equivalents from Microsoft, Excel, Word and PowerPoint, so covered for everything I need. In this folder, we've also got some apps that are good for reading PDFs and editing PDFs. There's actually a really useful app in here that I want to call out called Duet. Now, you've all heard of Apple Sidecar, which lets you use your iPad as a second screen for your Mac. Well, Duet does effectively the same thing, but for a PC. So you can actually use your iPad as a second screen for a Windows PC if you download the Duet app. This works really, really well. If you don't use a Mac in your place of work, but you still want the convenience of being able to use your iPad as a second screen, download Duet and you're going to be really impressed by the results. Next up, coming down to the bottom row, we've got a video conferencing folder, which contains my most commonly accessed video conferencing apps. Nothing too exciting in there. Zoom, Skype, WebEx, Teams, covers you for pretty much any meetings or video calls you might need to join. Next up here, we've got the productivity area. In here, there's some pretty useful apps. There's some stock apps like Apple's Reminders app and the Notes app. There's also Evernote, which I don't tend to use so much anymore, because as Apple have added more and more features to their own Notes app, I don't find the need for a third-party app. But Evernote is still a really good Notes app, especially if you're working across multiple different ecosystems, because Evernote isn't exclusive to Apple. And one app we haven't spoken about yet is Strides. Strides is basically a goal tracking app, which I find really useful. Within Strides, there's various different templates to add different kinds of trackers. You can add productivity-based trackers, and you get a whole sub-menu of different templates in there. So say you want to ban yourself from accessing social media, you can set that up from a template, and then from there you can just tick it off each day that you manage to successfully hit that goal. Lastly, down here in the final folder, we've got utilities, things like the translation app, voice memos, a couple of other things that I use fairly frequently, like Apple shortcuts. One of the things that's really useful is there's a whole load of pre-configured shortcuts for the Things app that let you automatically add things. For example, you can at one touch of a button add an entire packing list into the Things app for when you go away. So you can pre-configure what that list is, and then every time you go on holiday, you can just one click add a tickable packing list to the Things app, so you can tick it off as you work through. And Things provides basically pre-made shortcuts to do things like that, so it's really useful. I've actually set up a widget for those shortcuts for things specifically over on the second page here of my home screen. So you can see I've got 8 here available that I use quite frequently. Let's just choose one of these as an example. So we can select add an errand, which is going to bring me up things with a new to do, and it's automatically added the errand tag to it. So I can say collect dry cleaning. I can save that. It's then going to add it to my inbox where I can drag it to anywhere I like. So let's drag it into today, and then it's going to add it to my today list. I can drag it into home because that's a home task. You can see it's got that errand label on it, so you can quickly add things to your to-do list with pre-configured labels or pre-configured lists just by using those shortcuts which have already been created for you by things. So I haven't had to do any shortcut wizardry to set those up, and they just all live in that widget there. Everything else within here contains apps that I use but not that frequently, so that's why they all live on the second page. Most of my commonly used stuff is over here. It's a nice clean layout that gives me all the information I need in one place. In my mind, a good home screen on the iPad is one that you don't really need to leave to access the things you need every day. Of course, it's not useful to put all of your apps on here because then it's just going to get cluttered. If there's any apps that aren't on here that you need to access, you can just search for those. This particular home screen I think is really great as a kind of hybrid solution, so you don't need to switch between different home screens when you're at home and when you're at work. But of course, if you wanted to do that, you could use the focus modes that Apple now makes available to set up specific home screens tailored to when you're at home, tailored to when you're at work, or when you're working on your side project. And that'll about do it for this video. If you got value out of it, I would strongly encourage you to hit the like button that's somewhere down here, as well as subscribing to the channel, because if you subscribe to the channel, you'll see the future videos we post, and if you like this, then you'll probably like them. Turn on notifications as well so you get updated when we post a new video. Today's question for the chat is, what is your favorite Apple home screen widget and why? What you should probably do next is watch this video here, and I will see you there. Cheers.